Emily had just received her tuition refund from community college, the exact money she had been counting on, to catch up on her student loans from her previous university. She opened her banking app, expecting the usual numbers to appear, and then her heart sank. $500 were gone, vanished. No warning, no alert. No explanation. Showed an empty figure where her balance should have been. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tapped into the transaction details, and her stomach dropped when she saw the recipient, her mother's account. Emily froze, staring at the screen as a whirlwind of emotions hit her all at once. Anger, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Why would Mum take money from my account without saying a word? She thought, her chest tightening with every heartbeat. The quiet night around her suddenly felt suffocating. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant ticking of the hallway clock. Even the faint rustle of leaves outside seemed amplified, pressing on her awareness. Emily knew she couldn't let this slide. That $500 wasn't just a number, it was her money. The financial independence she had been painstakingly trying to reclaim. The security she needed to get back on track after her battle with cancer. She felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, respect, and being seen as an adult capable of managing her own life. The longer she stared at the screen, the clearer it became. She had to confront her mother, even if it meant turning this quiet night into a storm of confrontation. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. But one thing was certain: she wouldn't let her mother decide what was hers without saying a single word. That $500 was more than money. It was a boundary, and she was ready to fight to have it respected. The entire family sat around the dinner table. Warm light from the ceiling lamp bathed their familiar faces, casting a golden glow that should have felt comforting. But Emily sensed a subtle tension lingering in the air. At 21, she had just come through a grueling year battling cancer, now in remission, and was slowly recovering both physically and mentally. Dinner had become more than a meal for Emily, was a moment to observe, to read the unspoken cues between her parents, and to prepare herself for any subtle conflicts that might arise. Emily was attending community college, balancing her coursework, rest, and the ever-present worry about finances. She was determined and independent, but still not fully in control of her money. The tuition refund she had just received was earmarked to pay off lingering student loans from her previous university, and the thought of it made her mind tense even during a seemingly ordinary meal. Every bite of food was accompanied by calculations and silent speculation how much she could spend, what she could save, and how her mother might react to her managing her own finances. Across the table sat Karen, Emily's mother, 45, meticulously cutting slices of meat. Karen was controlling, prone to interference, and firmly convinced that she was helping. To Emily, however, her mother's so-called help often overstepped boundaries, particularly when it came to money. Karen monitored every small expenditure, occasionally offering suggestions or reminders about how Emily should spend or save, leaving Emily feeling as though her autonomy was being chipped away. Emily drew in a deep breath, reminding herself to remain patient, but underneath simmered a quiet frustration. Financial decisions were her domain, and she had no intention of letting anyone else dictate them at the head of the table. David, Emily's father, 48, chewed slowly, his eyes occasionally flicking between mother and daughter. Calm and composed, he seldom intervened but always served as a silent mediator when tensions rose. He wanted to maintain peace in the household and was willing to support Emily financially when necessary. But confrontation with Karen was something he tried to avoid. His patience and measured demeanor often diffused immediate flare-ups, but they also allowed underlying issues to linger unresolved. The house itself was cozy, yet at times lacked true privacy. Emily shared a bank account with her mother, an arrangement from when she was a child. At first, it seemed convenient Karen could access funds in emergencies, but now, as Emily prepared to use her refund to pay off old student loans, that shared account had become a source of anxiety. She sipped water, her eyes scanning her bank balance in the app, a creeping unease settling in. Would her mother have the right to withdraw her money without notice? Emily reminded herself that she had grown up, that she was fully capable of managing her own finances. But the years of partial dependency on her parents meant she still had to fight to maintain control over her money. The dinner table, bathed in warm yellow light, seemed tranquil on the surface, but beneath it lay simmering tensions, subtle conflicts ready to ignite. Emily drew another deep breath, feeling her heart quicken. She knew something significant was about to happen tonight, something that would force her to confront her mother directly over privacy, independence, and control over her finances. Dinner had just ended, and Emily pulled out her phone, intent on checking the tuition refund she had just received. This was the money she had been meticulously planning to use to pay off lingering student loans from her previous university. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine some relief from the constant stress over finances. She swiped through her banking app, expecting the familiar numbers, and then her heart sank. $500 were missing from her account. The transaction history showed the funds had been transferred to her mother's account. Emily froze in place, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Confusion, disbelief, and a surge of anger collided, leaving her momentarily paralyzed. This was money she had earmarked for something crucial, a lifeline for her financial independence. Why had her mother taken it without saying a word? She rifled through her memories, trying to find any connection to her previous courses or tuition payments that might justify the withdrawal. There was none. The more she thought about it, the more the questions multiplied. Did Mom even consider how this would affect me? Does she doubt that I can manage my own money? Or does she assume I wouldn't notice? A heavy sense of helplessness began to settle over her, mingling with a simmering, almost electric anger. Emily felt as if her autonomy, her ability to make even small decisions about her own life, had been violated. Her hands shook slightly as they clutched the phone, and her heart pounded violently in her chest. She paced the living room, each footstep echoing softly on the hardwood floor. The familiar surroundings of home suddenly feeling foreign and confining as she walked. Her mind replayed the dinner scene in agonizing detail, the warm yellow light from the overhead lamp washing over the table, her mother sitting calmly with that ever-watchful gaze, her father quiet at the head of the table, his eyes flicking from one of them to the other. The house itself seemed peaceful, almost idyllic, but Emily could feel the undercurrent of tension that had been simmering for months. It was subtle, invisible, yet undeniably present, like smoke gathering behind a door, waiting for a spark. Her finger traced the numbers on the screen over and over, and the mix of frustration and disbelief surged again, stronger this time. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing thoughts, but the anger had already taken root. It was clear that if she didn't confront this now, the rift between her and her mother would only widen, and the sense of losing control over her own finances would fester further. Emily's chest tightened with a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew she had to address this directly. She could not let it slide as if nothing had happened, and yet the thought of the confrontation made her stomach churn. How would Karen react? Would she provide a reasonable explanation or dismiss Emily's concerns as overreacting? Would she acknowledge that Emily had grown, that she was capable of managing her own money, or would she continue asserting control, imposing her authority under the guise of helping? The house was eerily silent, amplifying every sound, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, even the soft rustle of the curtains. Each tick seemed like a countdown, reminding Emily that a confrontation was imminent. She could feel the tension coiling in her body, a mixture of fear, frustration, and resolve. She had long sensed that this shared bank account, once a symbol of parental support, could become a flashpoint. And now that moment had arrived. Emily ran a hand through her hair, pacing back and forth as her mind raced. She visualized the conversation ahead, the questions she would need to ask, the justifications she would demand, and the anger she might not be able to fully contain. What had started as an ordinary evening was transforming into a battlefield of emotions, a clash between her mother's need to control and Emily's right to independence. She stopped in the middle of the living room, staring at the ceiling, and felt her heartbeat gradually slowing, though the tension remained like a taut string. Emily realized that this was more than just about money. It was about respect, trust, and recognition of her autonomy. The $500 was only a symbol. The real issue was the repeated disregard for her boundaries. Tonight, she would have to stand her ground, speak her truth, and reclaim the control she deserved. Drawing a deep, steadying breath, she felt a surge of determination. She knew the conversation would be uncomfortable, possibly explosive, but she also understood that avoiding it would only prolong the feeling of powerlessness. Emily braced herself mentally, preparing for the questions, the explanations, and the inevitable clash of wills that lay ahead. A quiet, ordinary night was about to become a storm, a test of boundaries, independence, and the strength it took to assert oneself in a family where love and control were often entangled. Late at night, when the house was wrapped in a deep, almost tangible silence, Emily lay in bed but couldn't find rest. The glow from her phone cast sharp shadows across her face, highlighting the fatigue etched into her features. Yet her eyes were wide, tense, and alert. Her fingers hovered over the screen, scrolling through her banking app once more, hoping, almost desperately, that she had made a mistake. But there it was, again, the number glaring at her. $500 missing, transferred to her mother's account. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Confusion, disbelief, and a surge of anger collided violently, leaving her momentarily frozen. This was not just money. It was her carefully planned path toward reclaiming control over her finances, a tangible piece of the independence she had fought for, especially after surviving cancer. Why would her mother take it without so much as a warning? Emily's mind raced, replaying every detail she could think of. This refund had nothing to do with her previous university courses. There was no justification for her mother to assume it was hers to take. Questions hammered through her mind in a relentless loop. Did Mum think I wouldn't notice? Does she doubt I'm capable of managing my own money? Or does she just not care how this affects me? The helplessness weighed on her chest, mingling with a simmering, almost electric anger. Emily felt as if the very foundation of her autonomy, the control she had over her own life, had been invaded. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her phone, and she began pacing the room, each step echoing softly on the hardwood floor. Her thoughts spun like a cyclone, possible reasons, imagined excuses, the what-ifs that could have bins. Her mind replayed dinner, every detail vivid and sharp, the warm yellow light of the overhead lamp spilling onto the table, her mother's calm but ever watchful expression, her father sitting quietly at the head of the table, occasionally glancing between them. The house, which had always seemed so safe and familiar, now felt like a cage of silent judgment. Emily realized that the undercurrent of tension she had felt for months, the subtle monitoring of her spending, the constant help that often overstepped boundaries, was now boiling to the surface. Her finger hovered over the numbers on the phone screen again, tracing the transaction as frustration surged higher. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her thoughts, but the anger was a living thing inside her, pulsing with every heartbeat. If she didn't confront this immediately, she knew the breach of trust would only widen. The sense of losing control over her own finances would fester, silently eroding the boundaries she had struggled to establish. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. She knew she had to speak to her mother directly. There was no other way. Avoiding it would only give her mother tacit permission to make these decisions unilaterally. Yet the thought of confronting Karen made her stomach tighten. How would her mother respond? Would she offer a reasonable explanation, or dismiss Emily's concerns as overreacting? Would she finally recognize that Emily had grown into an adult capable of managing her own finances? Or would she cling to control, insisting she knew best? The house was unnervingly still. Every sound was amplified, the faint tick of the clock, the low hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of the curtains moving in a breeze. Each tick felt like a countdown, a reminder that a confrontation was inevitable. Emily could feel the tension coiling through her body, a mixture of fear, frustration, and unwavering resolve. The shared bank account, once a symbol of security and parental support, had become a symbol of conflict. She rose from the bed, pacing back and forth, trying to shake the heaviness from her chest. Her thoughts raced, visualizing the conversation to come, the questions she would demand answers to, the justifications she would need, the anger she might not be able to fully contain. What had begun as a quiet, ordinary night had now become a battleground, a clash of wills between mother and daughter, control and independence. Emily's gaze drifted to the ceiling, her heartbeat slowing slightly, but the tension remaining taut like a coiled spring. She realized that this wasn't merely about $500. It was about autonomy, respect, and personal boundaries. The money was a symbol of her independence, her right to make her own decisions, and her mother's actions had crossed a line. Tonight, she would stand her ground. She would speak her truth. She would reclaim what was hers. Taking a long, steadying breath, Emily felt determination rising from deep within her. She braced herself mentally, preparing for the conversation ahead, the questions she would ask, the explanations she would demand, the emotions that would inevitably spill over. A quiet, ordinary night had been transformed into a storm, a test of boundaries, independence, and the courage to assert oneself in a family where love and control were inextricably intertwined. Every tick of the clock reminded her that she could no longer remain silent. Emily's resolve crystallized. She would not allow fear or politeness to prevent her from defending her rights. She would not allow her mother's assumptions to override her autonomy. The house might be silent, the night might seem calm, but Emily knew the coming confrontation would be anything but peaceful. This was the moment to reclaim her voice, her money, and her independence, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Emily could no longer contain her emotions. She stood in the middle of the living room, phone clutched tightly in her hands, the overhead light casting a harsh glare on her flushed face. Her heart pounded violently. Each breath came in short, sharp bursts, and her voice rang through the silent house, firm and unwavering. "Mom, you cannot just take my money without telling me. I needed that money to pay off my old tuition." Karen froze for a moment, her eyebrows knitting together, phone still warm in her hand. Her voice carried a mix of frustration and disbelief. "Emily, I thought it was extra from your old class, the one your dad already paid for. You've spent $5 here, $20 there. I figured you wouldn't notice." Heat surged through Emily's body, anger exploding like a sudden storm. "Those small amounts don't matter. I didn't ask you to touch my money. I want control over my own finances, and you cannot decide for me." Karen stepped back slightly, face reddening, caught between irritation and surprise at her daughter's outburst. Her voice wavered, but she continued to justify herself. "I only wanted to help. I didn't think you'd mind. And calling me in the middle of the night over this, that's too much." Emily drew a deep, trembling breath, her voice quivering but resolute. "This is not too much. This is about my money. You cannot withdraw from my account without asking me. I deserve to know what's happening with my own finances." The room seemed frozen, every breath, every glance charged with tension. Emily felt the weight of months of pent-up frustration, the constant monitoring of her purchases, the helpful nudges and reminders, all culminating in this heated confrontation. It was as if every little intrusion had been stored up, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt. Karen's hands trembled slightly, her face tense as she tried to maintain calm, but the pressure was palpable. "Emily, I just wanted to help. Don't you think I meant well?" Emily's fists clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white, but she didn't let go. Her voice, though tinged with exhaustion, carried a fierce clarity. "You are not helping. You are overstepping into my life. I am grown, and I have the right to manage my own money. You don't get to make decisions for me." Every word she spoke was a declaration of her independence. Her body felt hot, her heart racing, every nerve ending alert with a mix of anger, betrayal, and determination. This wasn't just a financial dispute, it was about respect, autonomy, and personal boundaries. Karen inhaled sharply, glancing at the phone in her hand, her eyes flicking to her daughter's. A part of her understood, yet she still clung to her own reasoning. I didn't realize you'd be this upset. I just thought you wouldn't notice. I only wanted to help." Emily ground her teeth, her voice tinged with exhaustion but unyielding. "I cannot accept this. You are not allowed to take my money without asking. I need to reclaim control over my finances, and you have to return the $500 now." David, Emily's father, stood quietly nearby, the tension pressing on him like a weight. He wanted to intervene, but the intensity in the room froze him. The house seemed suffocating, filled with Emily's sharp breaths, Karen's stammered defenses, the rhythmic ticking of the clock, and the occasional hum of a distant appliance. Each sound accentuated the strained atmosphere. Emily realized this confrontation was no longer about $500. It was about autonomy, respect, and personal boundaries. She knew that if she didn't assert herself now, her mother's pattern of interference would continue, and conflicts like this would keep resurfacing. The mix of anger, frustration, and heartbreak surged within her. Yet it also forged a powerful determination. She would not allow her mother to interfere with her independence again. The room felt electrically charged. Every second stretched, heavy and suffocating. Emily's mind raced with memories. The small purchases her mother had commented on, the friendly advice that often felt like surveillance, the way Karen monitored even minor decisions. All of it now coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. Her independence was under attack, and she had to reclaim it. Karen's voice softened slightly, tinged with guilt and surprise. "Emily, I didn't think you'd react like this. I thought you wouldn't notice. I wanted to help." Emily's jaw tightened. She spoke with quiet intensity, her words deliberate and unwavering. "This is not about whether I notice or not. This is about my life, my money, and my boundaries. You don't get to make these decisions for me. You need to return my $500 immediately, and you need to respect that from now on." The tension stretched on, both standing in the room, eyes locked, breaths heavy. Emily's resolve burned bright, her voice, her posture, every movement was an assertion of her adulthood. She knew that this confrontation was the climax of months of suppressed emotions. Every intrusive remark, every well-meaning overstep, had built up to this night, and she would not allow it to go unresolved. For the first time, she felt a clarity amid the storm of anger and hurt. She wasn't just demanding money back. She was demanding recognition of her independence, her ability to make decisions, and her right to be treated with respect. The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of unspoken words and past frustrations pressing down. Emily took a long, controlled breath, feeling the tension coil and uncoil within her. She understood that this moment would set the tone for all future interactions. The house, quiet except for the ticking clock, felt suspended in time. Emily's heart pounded with a mixture of fear, frustration, and determination. Tonight, she would reclaim her agency. Tonight, she would ensure that her autonomy was acknowledged. This confrontation was no longer about $500. It was about respect, boundaries, and the right to be treated as an adult. Emily felt a surge of courage as she stood her ground, ready for whatever response her mother might offer. The silence hung heavily, the tension thick, and for the first time, Emily felt fully prepared to assert herself, come what may. After what felt like an eternity of tense silence, Emily stood rigid in the living room, her phone still clutched tightly in her hands. Her eyes never left her mother's face, searching for any sign of understanding or remorse. Across the room, Karen exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging with a mixture of fatigue and faint guilt. The house was enveloped in a quiet so profound that every tick of the clock sounded like a hammer striking the tension that had been quietly building between them for months. Maybe years. "All right. I'll give the money back to you," Karen said finally, her voice low, almost hesitant, softened by a hint of shame. Her gaze met Emily's eyes, carrying the unspoken acknowledgement of her overstep. "I just wanted to help you." A wave of relief surged through Emily, washing over her like a sudden downpour after a long drought. The $500 was being returned, yet the relief was complicated a bittersweet mix of vindication and lingering pain. The money back in her account did not erase the scar left by the intrusion. She looked at her mother, eyes heavy with unsaid questions. Why did she think it was okay to take my money without telling me? Why didn't she trust me to manage my own finances? Why didn't she respect my boundaries? "Thank you. But I still don't understand why you did it," Emily said, her voice measured but soft, carrying both the weight of relief and the echo of hurt. She rested a hand on the returned funds, feeling simultaneously the thrill of regained control and the uneasy reminder of vulnerability, the fragility of trust in their relationship. Karen lowered her gaze, fidgeting with her hands, remaining silent for several seconds. Then, in a quieter, almost trembling voice, she said, "I'll try to understand you better. I didn't mean to hurt you. I really didn't." Emily studied her mother, her expression a complex tapestry of anger, disappointment, and a subtle trace of compassion. She realized something crucial. Karen's actions were not born out of malice. Her mother had only been trying to express love in the way she knew, but in doing so, she had overstepped, crossing invisible boundaries that left Emily feeling exposed and violated. Relief mixed with residual pain. A reminder that reclaiming autonomy often comes with confronting uncomfortable truths about loved ones. Taking a deep, grounding breath, Emily felt the rapid beating of her heart slowly subside. She understood that this confrontation was more than reclaiming money. It was a pivotal moment to assert her independence and set boundaries. She was establishing a precedent for her mother. Emily was an adult, capable of making her own decisions, and this needed to be respected. Yet, at the same time, she understood that love, even well-intended, could unintentionally hurt, and that navigating these misunderstandings required patience and courage. The two sat in silence for several moments, the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of household appliances filling the room. The tension, though still palpable, had softened, allowing a delicate sense of calm and temporary relief to seep in. Emily felt acutely that this was a turning point. She had spoken her truth, reclaimed her agency, and her mother had acknowledged the overreaching acknowledgement, however imperfect. That marked progress. The $500 was back in Emily's account, but victory was nuanced. It was not just a matter of money. It was a lesson in personal boundaries, respect, and clear communication. Emily realized that future financial decisions, or any area where independence could be challenged, would require transparency to prevent misunderstandings from escalating again. She placed her phone down and sat back, exhaling deeply, letting her gaze roam over the quiet house. She reflected on the incident with a mixture of relief, introspection, and cautious optimism. She told herself that in the future, she would advocate more firmly for her autonomy, while also trying to understand her mother's perspective. Love could be misinterpreted or become harmful when boundaries were not clearly defined, and she needed to learn the delicate balance between compassion and self-protection. This moment, fraught with conflict, had taught her that asserting oneself could coexist with empathy. Even in the most emotionally charged circumstances, Emily's mind wandered over the past months, recalling small incidents where Karen had commented on trivial purchases, offered helpful advice, or intervened in seemingly minor decisions. Each had seemed insignificant in isolation, but now coalesced into a pattern of intrusion, eroding Emily's sense of independence. The confrontation tonight had been the release of that pent-up tension, necessary clash that brought long-suppressed emotions to the surface, forcing acknowledgement, dialogue, and a re-evaluation of their relationship dynamics. Karen finally spoke again, her voice softer, almost hesitant, tinged with remorse. "Emily, I didn't realize you'd react this strongly. I just thought you wouldn't notice. I only wanted to help." Emily's jaw tightened, but her voice remained firm, imbued with the clarity of hard-won self-awareness. "It's not about whether I noticed or not. It's about respect, boundaries, and my right to manage my life. You cannot make decisions about my money without my consent. I am grown now, and I need my independence recognized. The room seemed to contract around them, charged with the weight of unspoken frustrations, unmet expectations, and the raw honesty now laid bare. Emily felt a surge of empowerment alongside lingering vulnerability. She had taken a decisive stand, yet she understood the delicate, ongoing process of rebuilding trust and defining boundaries in a loving, yet imperfect, family dynamic. This night marked the climax of their conflictive frustration. Every hurt, every suppressed resentment had finally been articulated. Yet it also opened the door for reconciliation, for mutual understanding, and for a gradual realignment of respect and personal agency. Emily knew the journey was far from over, but she had taken a critical step, standing tall, asserting her rights, and showing that she could both love and defend herself for the first time. She felt the weight of both anger and empowerment intermingling. This wasn't just about $500. It was about claiming her identity as an adult, demanding respect, and fostering a healthier, more transparent relationship with her mother. The house, still quiet except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock, seemed to hold its breath with her, acknowledging the significance of the moment. Emily drew another deep breath, feeling her heartbeat slowly steady, the initial shock and intensity giving way to a reflective calm. She understood that asserting herself today was a small victory, but a meaningful one, a step toward establishing clarity, fairness, and mutual respect in the ongoing dance of love, boundaries, and independence within her family. The next morning, the sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen blinds, casting long, soft shadows across the countertops. The room carried the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, but it did little to chase away the heavy tension lingering from the previous night. Emily sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped tightly around a steaming mug, her eyes fixed on the rising wisps of vapor, as if tracing her own tangled thoughts in the spirals of steam. Her mind was a battlefield. She had reclaimed the $500 that had been taken from her account without permission. Yet the victory felt incomplete. The act of standing up to her mother was empowering, but the emotional weight of the confrontation, the lingering hurt, and the sense of betrayal hung over her like a shadow. Every detail from last night replayed in her mind, the tight grip on her phone, the racing heartbeat, Karen's hesitant words, the silence that followed each statement, the clock ticking relentlessly in the background. Karen entered the kitchen. Footsteps deliberate, her tone sharper than the soft morning light would suggest. "Emily, you made all that noise last night over just $500. Couldn't you have asked me politely?" Emily's chest tightened. The words stung, not merely as a rebuke, but as a reminder that despite her assertiveness the night before, her mother still saw her as a child who needed to be corrected. A wave of frustration and helplessness swept over her. She had fought for control over her money, yet it seemed the battle was far from over. "I just wanted to know what happened to my money," Emily said, her voice soft, yet trembling with restrained emotion. "It's not a small matter for me. I manage my finances. I make my own decisions. I deserve to be treated with respect." Karen's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of regret crossing her features, though her posture remained tense. "I was only trying to help. You called me in the middle of the night and kept me awake. You need to learn to respect others, Emily." Emily felt the mixture of love and control in her mother's words, a familiar but complicated pattern she had known all her life. She set the coffee down, straightened her back, and lifted her gaze to meet her mother's. Her eyes held defiance, hurt, and an underlying thread of compassion. "You don't understand. I'm an adult now. I have the right to control my own money and decide how to use it. I am not a child to be monitored or corrected for every small decision I make." The kitchen seemed to contract around them. The ticking clock sounded louder, echoing the invisible gap that had existed between them for years. Emily could feel her heartbeat, each pulse thumping in rhythm with the tension in the room. Each breath carried the weight of months, maybe years, of minor interventions, helpful suggestions, and unspoken judgments that had chipped away at her sense of autonomy. Karen's face softened, her eyes flicking to the phone lying on the table, a tangible reminder of last night's confrontation. I don't want to hurt you, but I worry about you, too," she said quietly, her voice betraying a hint of vulnerability. Emily exhaled slowly, a combination of relief and residual pain washing over her. She realized, in that moment, that her mother's love was genuine, even if it was expressed in ways that crossed the boundaries she needed. The $500, she recognized now, was merely a surface issue. The deeper concern was about respect, autonomy, and personal boundaries lessons. She knew she had to uphold firmly to protect herself and her independence. Sunlight pooled across the tabletop, catching the faint glimmer of the returned $500 in her bank app. The sense of victory was intertwined with lingering vulnerability. The incident had reinforced how delicate the balance of trust and respect within her family truly was. Emily felt a quiet resolve form within her, determination to maintain her autonomy while navigating the complexities of her mother's love. She raised the mug again, letting the warmth seep into her hands, grounding herself. "From now on," she thought, "every financial decision I make will be transparent, deliberate, and firmly mine. I will respect my mother, but I will not surrender my autonomy. And I will work to understand her, to prevent misunderstandings from escalating." Karen, sensing Emily's inner strength, allowed herself a small sigh. She recognized her daughter was no longer a child, and that helping sometimes meant stepping back and trusting Emily to make her own choices. Still, worry lingered in her expression. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Emily sipped her coffee, listening to the soft sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds outside, the occasional creak of floorboards. Each sound underscored the contrast between external calm and internal tension, a reminder that while some conflicts can be resolved, trust and understanding require time to rebuild. As she gazed out the window, sunlight warming her face, Emily realized that the morning brought clarity. This wasn't just about the $500, it was about establishing boundaries, protecting her independence, and fostering mutual respect. She knew that mistakes and misunderstandings could happen again, but she also recognized that asserting herself with calm, clear communication was the first step toward balancing love and autonomy. The kitchen, once a battlefield of words and emotions, now held a tentative peace. Yet the lesson remained vivid. Love is complex, autonomy is hard-won, and growing up sometimes means standing firm even against those who care for you the most. Emily knew the road ahead would have challenges, but she felt prepared. She had reclaimed her money, her voice, and her self-respect, and in doing so, she had begun to carve out the space to truly become her own person. By midday, Emily sat by the window, the sunlight filtering gently across her hair and shoulders, yet her mind was far from calm. The $500 had been returned to her account, but the sense of relief it brought was only partial. A heavier, more persistent weight lingered in her chest, questions, doubts, and an ache she couldn't quite shake. She watched her mother, Karen, moving slowly through the kitchen, methodically stacking dishes and wiping counters. Her movements were calm, even mechanical, yet Emily could sense the residual tension from last night lingering in her posture, in the tight set of her shoulders, in the occasional glance she cast toward her daughter. Emily's gaze lingered, wondering silently, does Mom truly understand that I've grown up? Does she see me as the capable adult I am, or will she always view me through the lens of childhood, needing supervision and control? The incident with the $500 wasn't just about money. It was about trust, autonomy, and the unspoken rules of their relationship. Emily felt that trust had been breached, not in a malicious way, perhaps, but in a manner that left her autonomy in question. A part of her longed to feel safe in her own home, confident that her decisions and finances would be respected. Another part wrestled with empathy for her mother, who had acted out of what she believed was love and concern, albeit in a controlling way. As she sipped her coffee, watching the steam curl upward, Emily reflected on the tension-filled night. She remembered the tight knot in her chest as she had confronted her mother, the rising heat of anger, and the tremor in her voice that had accompanied her firm insistence. This is my money. My decisions. I deserve respect. She had stood up for herself, yet the aftermath left her unsettled. She could see now that winning the $500 back had not erased the underlying issues. It had only exposed the deeper fissures in their relationship. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the wall clock. Even in this stillness, Emily could feel the unspoken lines drawn between her and her mother. Lines that money, words, or even apologies could not instantly erase. The $500 was just a symbol of something far more significant, the ongoing struggle for respect, for recognition as an independent adult, and for boundaries that were acknowledged and honored. Her thoughts turned again to the practical challenges ahead. How would she ensure that her financial independence was protected from further overreach? Should she insist on keeping her account completely separate, or establish clearer communication with her mother? Could she navigate this without permanently harming their relationship? These questions swirled, leaving her with no simple answers. Emily felt a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. She realized that growing up wasn't just about earning or managing money. It was about asserting oneself in relationships, setting limits, and facing those she loved with honesty, even when it risked conflict. Standing up to her mother had been terrifying, but it was necessary. She understood that this was only the beginning of a longer journey toward mutual understanding, one that would require patience, courage, and consistent effort. She looked out the window, the sunlight warm on her face, and breathed deeply. A part of her felt victorious. She had reclaimed control over her money, reaffirmed her rights, and voiced her boundaries clearly. Yet another part of her felt fragile, aware that trust was delicate and that love, when misinterpreted or expressed through control, could unintentionally wound. Karen moved past her, stacking the last few plates in the sink. Their eyes briefly met, and Emily could see a flicker of recognition in her mother's gaze, perhaps a silent acknowledgement that lines had been crossed, that respect had been demanded and deserved. Emily felt a small surge of hope, tempered by the reality that understanding would take time and effort from both of them. The $500 had returned to her account. But Emily knew that the real victory lay in asserting herself and in recognizing her own needs. She understood that boundaries, respect, and independence were not things she could demand once and forget they were ongoing commitments. Lessons in patience, communication, and self-respect, sitting there. Emily closed her eyes for a moment and let out a long, steady breath. She felt the weight in her chest lighten, though the memory of the argument, the tension, and the emotional strain remained. She silently vowed to herself, "I will continue to protect my independence. I will continue to speak up when boundaries are crossed. I will learn to navigate love and control, respect and care, without losing myself." And with that, Emily opened her eyes, looking around the quiet house. The story of the $500 had reached a pause, but the journey had just begun. The unresolved tension, the questions about respect, trust, and autonomy, lingered like a gentle hum reminding her that growing up, truly growing up, was not just about money, but about courage, self-respect, and learning to face the people you love with honesty, even when it's hard. The narrative closed on this quiet, reflective moment. The listener or reader could imagine the path ahead. Emily navigating her independence, finding ways to communicate boundaries, and building a relationship with her mother that balanced love with respect, care with autonomy. The $500 was gone from the conflict, but its lessons and implications remained, shaping the journey of a young woman stepping into adulthood, aware of her worth and ready to claim it fully.